Hello, welcome to Global Eye. I am Parikshit Luthra. In a televised address, President Putin formally announced the annexation of Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia and said this is the expression of the will of the people and these areas will now be part of Russia forever. He also warned that Russia will use all available means to guard these regions. Putin urged Ukraine to come to the negotiating table, but also said that Russia will not give up the newly incorporated regions. The head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, firmly rejected the recent referendums and annexation. Ukraine President Zelensky held a meeting with his military chiefs to discuss further liberation of Russian-occupied Ukrainian territory. Will the war now escalate? Is the cost of war finally putting pressure on Putin? And is the Russian president now looking for an exit? Here's what Putin had to say.
I want Kyiv regime and their sponsors from the West to hear me, to heed me. I want everyone to remember that people who live in Donetsk and Lugansk and Kherson and Zaporozhye, now they become our citizens forever. We appeal to the Kyiv regime to cease fire immediately, all the hostilities, the war that they started back in 2014, and to go back at the negotiations table, because we are ready to do that. And we have said that on many occasions, but the choice of the people of Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye and Kherson, we are not going to discuss that. The choice was made and Russia will not betray this choice.
All right, let's go across to Ugo Astuto, Ambassador of EU to India. Ambassador Astuto, thank you very much for joining us. How do you react to what Putin said in terms of annexing 4 areas of Ukraine, saying that he's going to defend them with all he has?
Well, look, we reject and condemn this illegal annexation. After sham referenda, we do not recognize this action, and I think the international community will not recognize that. And these are signs of failure, of fear, of desperation on the side of President Putin. What he sees is war of aggression failing, and he's now trying to escalate and intimidate. But we shall not be intimidated.
Right. Do you also get a sense that he's now coming under pressure? He said Russia is ready to come to the negotiating table. He urged Ukraine to start talks, but also said that they will not let go of these areas. Do you somehow feel that the pressure is now getting to President Putin?
Well, I think the facts on the ground speak for themselves. The war has failed in all its objectives. And we have also seen in the past couple of days the reaction of almost 200,000 Russians, most of them well-educated Russians. They are voting with their feet. They are fleeing the perspective of the draft. They don't want to participate in a war that they know is unprovoked and unjustified. So I see a number of clear signals that President Putin is starting to suffer the consequences of his unwarranted and unjustified war.
Right. Let me also get in Ambassador Daniel Fried, who's joining us. Ambassador Fried, how do you read the message coming from the Kremlin, Putin addressing his people in Russia, also sending out a message to the West that they will continue fighting, they will defend these areas? How do you see this message today?
Putin has doubled down on his aggression because he is not winning his war. Your previous guest was spot on accurate. That is, the Russian people don't seem enthusiastic about this war. The Russian economy is hurting because of the sanctions. And most important, the Russian military is no longer winning. They're being forced to retreat. So faced with bad news on the battlefield, bad news in the economy, and social resistance to his war, Putin is doubling down. His offer of negotiations to the Ukrainians is no offer at all. It's a demand for their surrender. It's not clear that Putin can hold these territories. So right now, the best play for the world is to push back on Putin. By the way, in his speech, he did implicitly threaten nuclear weapons use. And India may have something to say about that. I thought that Mr. Modi was quite strong in Tashkent the other week, noting that Putin needs to find a way to peace. It's my paraphrase. That was a good, solid statement. And I think that India can play an important role in convincing Putin to stand down if he can. But the world, whatever it does, should not accept Putin's aggression. We should keep pushing back. Right.
That's an important statement that you made. I was about to come to that, Ambassador Fried. Ambassador Astuto, do you also get a sense that this is a strong threat of use of nuclear weapons coming from President Putin? How do you think the European Union will now react to what President Putin may do in the coming days?
But it's not the first time that we hear this sort of innuendo. It's unacceptable to threaten the use of nuclear weapons. And I think the international community is noticing, and the isolation of President Putin will grow accordingly. As to the European Union, well, we shall not be intimidated. We are about to present a new package of sanctions. It's going to be the 8th, and these sanctions are binding. And again, this new package of sanctions will be broad and comprehensive. It will touch on trade. It will touch on on a price cap on the price of oil, and it will further extend the listing of persons directly accountable for the Russian war of aggression. So the reaction of the European Union and its friends and partners in NATO and beyond is very clear. We shall continue to support Ukraine. We shall continue to support the defense of Ukraine's right to self-determination, the defense of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of a peaceful country against an illegal and unprovoked aggression from Russia and from President Putin.
Right. Ambassador Fried, do you get a sense that things are now likely to escalate in the coming days? How well equipped is Ukraine to fight back? And do we expect US to supplement and further increase military cooperation with Ukraine? Do you think the next few days will be very critical?
I think we may see an escalation from the Russian side. We cannot rule out Putin's use of nuclear weapons. I still think that Putin is trying to frighten us by talking about nuclear use rather than preparing to actually use nuclear weapons, but he could. He hinted as much in his speech. The United States will certainly continue to provide Ukraine the weapons it needs to defend itself. This is entirely proper under the United Nations Charter. We are helping a country, the victim of aggression, defend itself. That's right. And we're not the only country. There are many European countries that are providing Ukraine with weapons, and not just European countries. I also think that economic sanctions will intensify against Russia. I think the EU has a package under preparation, as you just heard. The United States government is preparing additional sanctions. And there are other economic steps we can take, tightening our export controls. We need to think about the Russian assets that have been frozen. We shouldn't ask our taxpayers to pay for Putin's crimes when we are sitting on $300 billion of Russian money. So there's a lot we can do, but the next few days and weeks may be very difficult indeed.
Right. Also, do you feel that there is a strong and sincere effort towards negotiation now? Here you have Putin saying that we urge Ukraine to come to the negotiating table, but Moscow will not give up the newly incorporated regions. So how do you see this offer of talks coming from President Putin, Ambassador Fried?
It is not a serious offer at all. It is a demand for Ukraine's surrender. Putin does not want talks, but his bluster does not change the fact that his army is not winning on the battlefields. Today, there are reports of Russian forces being surrounded in the east. So Putin's rhetoric exceeds his power, and it is important for us to remember it. We should not push Ukraine into surrender, which is what Putin is demanding of us. He's trying to frighten us all into withdrawing support for Ukraine. I see a grim situation, but to give in to Putin's nuclear blackmail now would mean inviting worse aggression to come.
Right, right. And Ambassador Astuto, my final question to you. From the European Union point of view, what will be the best case scenario in order to resolve this issue diplomatically? If we ask the European Union about what is the diplomatic way out of this, what is the solution out of this, what would be a solution that is acceptable to the European Union?
Well, look, what I can say is that this is a war started by President Putin, and that President Putin can end it. What he needs to do is to withdraw, to cease hostilities, withdraw its troops without conditions, and accept the fact that Ukraine has a right to exist, and has a right to exist within its internationally recognized borders. Again, we see that this war is extremely unpopular in Russia. The people do not have the right to express their dissent. Demonstrations are repressed. But we see the crowds of Russians fleeing towards the borders to avoid to be engaged in this unjust aggression. I think that's very significant.
Right. Ambassador Fried, to just come back to you once again, is the U.S. Does the U.S. have a clear strategy now when it comes to dealing with President Putin? Now that the speech has been made by the Kremlin, what will be some of the next possible steps which we could see from the Biden administration?
I think we will see today, in the next few hours, a denunciation of the speech and a reaffirmation of U.S. support for Ukraine in its fight, really, for its national existence. I'm fairly confident we'll see that reaction within the coming hours. More broadly, I think you will see publicly announcements of our intention to continue supporting Ukraine militarily and intention to increase the economic pressure on Russia. I think privately you will also see the Americans talking to major democracies and nuclear powers. I think they will speak with India, and I think they should, about sending the message to Putin that use of nuclear weapons will result in a very strong reaction from the world, not just the United States, not just the West. I think Putin needs to hear the message from responsible countries that the use of nuclear weapons is not open to him. That's a tough message, and it needs to be delivered by all of us.
Right. All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Fried and Ambassador Astuto, for joining us here on Global Eye. We are going to take a short break, but when we return, we are going to be discussing the Brazilian election. There has been a lot of violence and tension in the run-up to the election. Remember, Jair Bolsonaro is lagging behind in the opinion polls, and there is a possibility that he may not go out easily if voted out. We'll get you more on that presidential election on Global Eye after a break.